just the intro slide. Okay, so we are live. Good.
Yes. So, yeah, 7 on the dot. Shall we start, Passion? Are you ready, Nina? Or...
I am ready. Anytime you would
okay.
like to start. Okay.
Great. Usually we have few WhatsApp or Zoom rules. It's always good to repeat them so that people won't forget.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, rule number 1, keep your microphone closed. Open it only if it is your turn to talk. But that's not for you, Nina. And then the second one, we'll be happy to see your beautiful faces, translators, poets, because I invited some poets. They can be inspired by your talk. So keep your camera open if there is nothing indecent in the background or distracting. Rule number 3, you can write your comments in the chat. I will read them. Or if you want us to listen to your beautiful voice, you can click on the icon below on the Zoom screen, and then you raise your hand. You'll be granted the opportunity to speak your mind. The last one, but not the least, you go straight to the point. Whether you're making a comment or asking a question, don't beat around the bush. Just tell us what you need. And then we are going to be very strict on the time today. It will be 1 hour, not more. Then what else? I think I don't need to tell translators to be polite and kind. Okay, great. So welcome everybody. I am very happy to have you here. Yeah, our number is growing. That's wonderful. So tonight we are talking about transcreation, and the full topic is Discover the Art of Transcreation, a hands-on experience by Nina Sattler-Hofder. So who is Nina? For you to have an idea of the person you are going to listen to, Nina is a translator, an interpreter, and a transcreator. She will tell us more about transcreation very soon. She speaks English, German, Norwegian, Danish, Spanish, and many others, I think.
Well.
Yeah, so tonight's talk will be in English for the purpose of the bilingualism in Cameroon. So let's have English today. And if you have any questions in German, in one of the languages he's speaking, feel free to ask the question in that regard. And then I'm going to show you a cover of her book, which I highly recommend because it has inspired me to start writing poetry. And then I won't go into the details. Those who were here earlier have heard about it. So please confirm if you can see my screen and the cover of the book. Can you?
Yep.
Okay, great. So Nina is also the author of Get Fit for the Future of Transcreation, a handbook on how to succeed in an undervalued market, because I think I didn't hear about transcreation during my training. And I guess many people here also, they have not really studied transcreation at school. If I'm wrong, when the time for question and answers will start, people will tell us. So what I've learned from her book is that localization is not transcreation. Translation is not transcreation. And there is also a way that she explains things very practical on how to, as a transcreator, to sell your gifts, because it's a gift. It's not just an academic knowledge that you are selling. You sell your skills to the client. You explain to them why your invoice is so high. Yeah, we talk about the money because
yeah. It's part of the package, yes.
Exactly. So she will also talk about creativity, how to stimulate your creativity. You are going to learn so much from her. So without further ado, what did I miss, Nina? You have the floor, and then if I forgot something in your introduction, okay. Yeah, you can tell me. Let me stop my screen share. So let's welcome Nina Sattler-Hofder. Do you want us to call you Mrs. Sattler-Hofder or Nina?
Nina would be great.
Okay.
If that is okay.
Let's welcome Nina. You have the floor, please, for your presentation. Later on, we'll ask questions. We'll not interrupt you. We are listening.
Okay. So thank you, Danielle, for that introduction, for that lovely introduction, for even showing my book. I wasn't prepared for that, but yeah, it's one of my yeah, it's become quite popular, and I'm very happy about that. So anyway, welcome everyone. So I've been asked to talk about transcreation for about 15, 20 minutes, which is quite the challenge, since I could do that for hours and days on end. So, well, anyhow, I'd like to start with my own journey, how I got to where I am today and why I got there, just to give you a sort of a bigger picture of what transcreation is really about. I won't be saying that much about definitions and stuff and theory because that's in the book, but my journey hopefully may be inspiring. So as you said, I'm a translator by training, a simultaneous interpreter, actually. But once I had my master's degree back in the early 90s, I worked as an interpreter. It was great, but I was 25 and I felt there was more that I could do. And I totally wasn't at capacity. I didn't really feel fulfilled.
Excuse me, Nina, please. Someone is not following the voice. We are going to mute everybody except Nina. Please turn off your microphone. Alec. Okay, good. Sorry, Lou.
No problem. That stuff happens. So, well, I was 25 anyway, so a while back. And I liked doing the interpreting work, but I didn't really feel fulfilled. So I took a wild decision, especially at the time there was no internet. So I went to South America, from Europe to South America, without speaking a word of Spanish at the time. But so that was quite a wild decision. But I learned it quickly, and I started to work in market research. And I absolutely thrived in that role, understanding how other people think, how their minds work. That was sort of totally the psychological aspect too. That was totally my thing. The analytical work, the research, the working with management. And I was moving up the ladder, and I was able to work with advertising agencies and in a more strategic capacity with strategic planners, but also copywriters, and conceiving promotions, even writing promotional concepts. And I absolutely loved that analytical, conceptual, strategic aspect of the work, of that kind of work. And maybe you feel a bit like that too, in the audience today. Maybe that's a bit of your strength too. I think that the analytical mind is big in most trained translators, and maybe you haven't really found the opportunity to exploit that potential that you have in addition to the more traditional translation training. So transcreation might be exactly your thing. So anyway, in my case, well, the children came and we were moving around a lot. So I decided to go back to my roots, to translation after the exciting years in market research and marketing. So as to be able to handle it all and also be there for my children and my family. And that was a good thing, because I realized that there was this demand for approaching translations of marketing texts, specifically from a strategic and copywriting angle, not so much with a typical translator mindset, but more like a salesperson. And very few translation providers at the time, if any, I mean, we are talking 25 years ago, understood how copywriting really works. They were either trained translators or trained copywriters, but very few combined it. And even my clients, they absolutely loved the work, but even they didn't understand or appreciate what went into this. So yeah, it was a bit crazy. In 2006, I traveled with a baby on my lap, an 8-month-old baby and a 9-year-old son, from all the way from Austria to New Orleans, for the American Translators Association's annual conference, and gave my very first presentation on transcreation. I felt so strongly about this. Although back then I called it translators hired as copywriters. I didn't really call it transcreation back then, but translators hired as copywriters. And that was my take back then. And still is really that transcreation is that combination of translation and copywriting. So you need experience and expertise in both, not just translation and say, well, you know, sort of, I'm also a writer, but real writing for business or for motivational purposes. And that is really a skill set and a gift, and also requires a certain training. So I did this. I started with my educational work, creating awareness among colleagues and clients, because I felt there was a real need to professionalize this type of work. And even today, I mean, transcreation isn't really taught in university because very few lecturers, if any, have that inside view of how copywriting and writing for motivational purposes works. And we're going to look a bit into that a bit later on. So in 2015, actually, I had a touch and go surgery, and I was forced to lie down a lot and really take a break. And that is when I wrote my first book on transcreation. My first book was actually in German, and that was a huge success. And I was totally surprised. I didn't expect this, but maybe it wasn't so surprising. And after that book got out, I was asked by so many, well, can't you write that book in English too? And I said, yeah, sure, I guess I can do that. And first I thought I'll just sort of transcreate my own book. But in essence, during those 3 years that had elapsed between my first book and when I was writing my second book, I gathered so much additional insight that the English book actually is a totally new book and a different book from the German one. And well, the rest I think is sort of history. So let's dive into it. What's going on here? Okay, doesn't want this. Doesn't want to move. Problem with moving on with the next slide, which is not what I wanted. Let me just go out here for a moment. Stuff happens, right? It got hung up apparently. Is there something I can do here? Oh, it gets stuck. Trying to close.
A technical issue?
Yes, it seems to have gotten hung up for some reason. Not sure what I can do about this. So I'm trying to stop it and restart it, but it sort of doesn't do anything right now.
Can I help on the problem, Nina?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure because I at this point I sort of can't. It seems I can't. I might have to sort of get out of the entire thing.
We wait for you if that's
okay. Let me see. Okay, here we are. Can you see my next slide?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Maybe it's loading.
Yeah.
Do you get the notification there that is loading? Oh.
Maybe I need to reshare the screen. Let me see. Yeah, let me just reshare the screen. Okay.
Perfect.
Yes, okay
I can
now.
see.
Yeah, well.
Services combined.
We translators, we are so good with solving stuff, aren't we? Okay, so anyway, so here's a more graphic illustration of what transcreation is. Two services combined. So it combines translation, both requires their own training and skills. So translation, what translators have been trained to do, and copywriting or copy creation, what copywriters have been trained to do. And these services are normally rendered by two different service providers or entities. Now, the focus in translation, as we have been taught, is on decoding source text meanings and nuances and transfer these faithfully. Whereas, I like to say we in translation we stay true to the source. That doesn't mean it's literal. It just means we try to be as truthful to the source text as we can, and also truthful to the author's intents. Whereas in copywriting, the only thing that really matters is the briefing that we have and the communication goal. And it doesn't really matter that much what the source text says, so the focus of the copy creation part is on engaging and on motivating and on persuading the reader. So we are, if the source text is not aligned with what we want to achieve in the target market, then we need to give preference and adapt, and cannot be as truthful to the source text, but always truthful to the briefing that we have. So that is really the major difference between what I call transcreation and translation. So transcreation is really this combined package what trans creators do. And also one point maybe of interest here is the most valuable skill that nowadays you can bring to the table if you work as a translator is subject matter expertise. So deep specialization in a specific niche, like a legal or IT or medical. Whereas you can also specialize in copywriting or in transcreation. But the most valuable skill that you can bring to the table is actually, the strategic expertise, the understanding how does creativity work. And I'm using inverted commas here because creativity is often misunderstood. There's many misconceptions out there about copywriting, about creativity, because people think that creativity is about, pretty words and fun wordplay, or that it's about academic writing or writing novels. Whereas copywriting really is about selling a message. It can be any kind of message. It can be somebody who says, take to the street, demonstrate for a good cause. Even that can be a message that you need to sell. More generally, it's about marketing. With everything that comes with that. And it has to come from a place of conviction. I, as a copywriter or a transcreator, need to be convinced of what I'm doing here. And so it's about conviction and persuasion, not fluffiness. So what is a copywriter? Back in 1982, Judy Charles said a copywriter is a salesperson behind a typewriter. Nowadays, it's a salesperson behind a PC. So essentially a salesperson, but doing it with written words, powerful written words where every word counts. And a good salesperson needs to be very clear, who am I talking to? I need to be very clear about my target persons. And what is this person's issue, concern, pain point? What does she want to know? And how can I give her that information in a persuasive way without wasting her time, given that there are, sort of 50 other salespersons already waiting in line? So we need to be succinct and to the point and address a specific need, be very clear about what we want to say, and use words that trigger a response. So copywriting is not like tongue in cheek or loaded with fluffy buzzwords, but messages that immediately get the reader's attention. And I am a singer. I sing in a choir and I absolutely love that. So I like to equate that with singing. And I know you may not believe me, so here is what I mean by that. So I say sing, like in the opera, the famous Aida opera. Of course, in copywriting, it's not about the famous opera. It's an allusion to the AIDA formula, which is an old and tried and tested copywriting formula and has nothing to do with the opera. But I just used the visual as a way for you to remember it more easily. So it's a formula that's helpful for structuring and analyzing your text. So first, you need to grab the reader's attention by using a catchy, relevant headline, a great first sentence, a hook, a great intro. Then, once you have that attention, the copy needs to intrigue further and create more interest. So that's the I, making the reader think, I want to learn more about this, or I want to go on reading. Let's see where this takes me. Then comes the desire, like, oh, readers should say to themselves, oh, wow, this is exactly what I've been looking for, followed by action. Like, clicking on the discover more button, or get in touch, or buy the book, or subscribe to a newsletter, whatever it is. So that's one of the very old school copywriting formulas, but works really well. The ultimate goal, just to recording stopped, I don't know, it said. Okay, so the ultimate goal, are you all with me?
Yes, I can hear you,
yeah.
Nina.
Okay, good.
IT to start recording again.
Okay. So the ultimate goal of transcreation is to give readers the feeling that the texts that they are reading were written specifically for them, not just for anyone, but for them specifically, and not simply taken from, a totally different culture, and it shows, and then, it's just thrown at them and hope that something sticks. That's not transcreation. So transcreation is the opposite of that. We want to create a new text for a new target group in a new target market. And this may sound a bit theoretical, so I'm going to show you an example of what I mean by that. So here is an example of a piece of copy that it did for an espresso. You can find it online. So I can show it here without violating any confidentiality. And it's an example of transcreation, illustrating how it is not about creating a really clever wordplay, and also to show that it isn't just about creating a text based on a source text, but about creating a text for a new and a specific target group. So the briefing, so the source text is the English brochure here, or it's also the website here where it says, meet our limited editions. And then it explains that it has a new limited edition coffee. It's called Ispirazione Shakerati, and the copy reads, shake up your summer with our new iced coffee, an intense roasted blend with the finest cocoa and spicy aromas that allows you to discover the pleasure of an authentic iced coffee from Italy. So the briefing I had was, make people want to taste this new coffee by giving them the Italy vibes, by steeping them in a summer holiday in Italy atmosphere and the Italian food and the coffee spirit. Now, Austrians love spending their summer, traditionally love spending their summer in Italy, so they have specific pictures in mind. They love the Italian vibe and they appreciate the Italian style coffee. So that's really our target group. We even see the target group here in the picture, which are, the personas. And while I'm at it, it's always in transcreation, it's so important to have the visuals that go with the text, because that gives us so much information. Our brain works, both visually and with text, even more visually than text-wise. So it's very important for us as transcreators to have the visuals that goes with the text. So what was the transcreation then? In the transcreation in German is für einen Sommer wie in Italien, which back translates as for a summer like in Italy. Now, why did we do that? I guess you guess why? Because we had that briefing. We wanted to true to the AIDA formula, we wanted to get their attention right away with a headline that immediately speaks to them and says, hey, this is about, you love Italy, right? So here's a coffee that makes you immediately feel like you're like in the summer in Italy. So we could have been, let's be honest, the English headline here is not really very inspired. It's a bit of a lazy thing, I think, in my view, without being too critical, but it's something we see quite often. And my Austrian client is very appreciative of when I come up with more creative solutions, more strategic solutions, I'd say, based on what they want to achieve. So how did I come up with this headline? We could have said something in German too, like discover. We can't use meet our limited editions, it doesn't translate well, but we could use something like discover our limited editions, for instance. But it's like, it's not really AIDA, is it? It's not very attention getting. So actually the briefing gave me the idea. I was playing around with summer and Italy and the coffee spirit and all of that. And I wrote my copy, and at one point I had this. I wrote this sentence for a summer like in Italy. That was actually in the beginning. It was my last sentence, and I was like, "Hey, this would make a really good headline. Actually, let's try this." And I suggested it to my client, and they loved it. So there are so many ways to spark your creativity, but the important thing is that you have some sort of strategic guidance of where you want to go, because once you know where you're going and what your goal is, your lighthouse, I like to liken it to a lighthouse in the distance. That's my goal, that's where I want to go. That keeps me on the line. I might, go back and forth and try out a lot of ideas. I usually have like maybe 30 ideas, and then I select just the 2 or 3 that I like best. But that's totally normal. It really depends on whether your client gives you that much time and pays for that much time. If they say, no, we don't have the budget, just do an easy solution, then we could have done the discover our limited editions version. But if they say, no, we really want to sell more, and we really want it to be fun, and we want it to be inspiring and attention getting, then that's one way to do it. So that's one example of how I work. Yeah, so the role of creativity is often misunderstood. I may overemphasize this, but it's really something that I care about a lot to make sure it's not misunderstood, because transcreation is a lot more about the ability to think on brief, to be clear on where I want to go, than about coming up with seemingly clever wordplay. We often see wordplays and think, oh no, that's so bad. And I prefer a really nice and honest and authentic headline rather than something fluffy and wordplay where people are like, ugh, what is this? It's not AIDA. So transcreation, if it's done well, it's a really powerful combination of skill sets, because whenever a text is meant to inspire, to engage, and motivate in a new target market, you want a transcreator on board, because a transcreator, a professional transcreator, understands when and where to translate, because often it's a mix. We have to translate, and then we have to judge, is this translation in line with my briefing? If it is, then we can keep it. If it isn't, we have to adapt and adapt and adapt some more. So we always need a briefing, and we always need a source text, and we need to know when and where to rewrite and how to do that. And that is actually a quote from my book. And yeah, so that was just giving you a taste of what transcreation is. And yeah, if you would like to follow me on LinkedIn, you will find me there. And now I'm open to questions, I'm sure, and hopefully you have lots of questions for me.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was straight to the point and very clear.
Yeah, hopefully.
I like it. And I encourage people to buy your book because you said the list here. In your book, it is much more in detail, and
yes.
And then they can learn more. Yeah, they can learn more. And
absolutely. I mean, there's so many ways to approach a transcreation job, and there's no standardized process. Like you do have certain steps. Okay, thank you.
Yes, her book for those who want to.
There are certain steps, but the important thing is always whatever you do, whatever creativity technique you prefer, to be clear, where do I want to go? Where do we want to go? What is it that the client really wants?
Okay, great. So I'm going to give the floor to anybody that has a question. You can just unmute, and if your background is decent and there's no noise, there's no distraction, you can put on your camera, turn on your camera, and then you ask your question or contributions. If you are discovering also transcreation, please let us know. It's good to have an idea.
Right.
So maybe while they're thinking about their question, I'm going to ask you, have you convinced some universities or some translation schools to introduce transcreation in their syllabus or curricula?
I know that one university in Spain, I know that several lecturers use my book in their training. How well they fare with that? I mean, translation training, it's a wide field, and not everyone is interested in transcreation, obviously. But I have done some trainings for universities as well. Okay. And they were always very excited about that. But it's not like it's a full program. But I do know, I have gotten feedback that, I mean, it's a book that's being used in universities, and I have many students actually that have approached me and said, I'm writing my thesis about transcreation and I have this and that question and so forth. And that's fun. That's great.
My second question is personal. I wrote my thesis on the translation of thriller novels titles from English to French. Right. Do you think I needed to read your book to have maybe some insight or to understand why this title is chosen instead of the other one? What do you think about that? Is it a transcreation work when they translate titles of novels, even of?
Yeah, I mean, titles of novels, it's often not even a transcreation, because it's often the publishers that decide. But it is, in a certain way, we could call it a transcreation, because the publishers, we can, as transcreators, we can often make recommendations, but the publishers will decide on what they think will sell best. So in that way, it's certainly a transcreation, in that it's very salesperson oriented. It's very target market, target audience oriented. What will sell best? So, just like the cover of a book, they usually change the cover of the book depending on the target market. It's totally different visuals. It's a very. I did a workshop on that once, and it was so fascinating to see how they would change covers in different countries. Like India was very colorful, and Norwegian was more like black and white sort of thing. So that was so fascinating. And the same goes for the title, that they will change it depending on what they think works best, and it can be something totally different, just like the headline that we just saw. Would you have had to read my book? I don't think so. I'm sure you did a great job without the book. Would have been interesting to see how, if that were available at the time, to see how my theories, aligned with your interpretations. That would certainly be an interesting aspect. Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't think you have to read it for that.
Okay, but it would be a plus, but I don't regret the time I read your book. So
thank you.
Dominique Frank Romeo. Yes, please unmute, and you can also put on your camera and then ask your question, please. Frank.
Hello, good evening to everyone. Good evening,
hello.
Nina.
Please give us your
Thank
name
you.
and then
sorry, I'm not going to open my camera. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem.
No problem.
Well, I'm really grateful for this presentation on transcreation. I mean, it's really, really, really insightful. Well, I have a question. I would like to understand, because in your work, you focus more on translating while doing some creation. But my worry is, while you are focused more on words, I would like to understand sometimes why transcreating. Can we equally transcreate images? Thank you.
Yes. There's often the case, I would say, between different cultures, that you, as the transcreator, would make recommendations to your client. If the client is not aware, you would say, this kind of picture would not work in our culture, or it might even be offensive, for instance, or it would be misinterpreted, and you would make recommendations. Usually we cannot actually change a picture, but it's definitely appreciated that you make recommendations, and then maybe even adapt the text based on that. So, there's so many ways to approach this, but it's really important, and thank you for asking that question, that we see ourselves as experts, as consultants to our clients, and really, don't hold back on our expertise, and tell them whatever you know from your experience, why something would not work or why something else would work better. Definitely. And I have always met clients that have been very appreciative and very surprised, because it's maybe relatively new. Maybe they're not used to translators actually, oh, you can talk. Yeah, so definitely. I hope that was your question, and yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. I think you answered the question. Thank you.
Okay, good, great.
Thank you, Frank. There's Fabrice that has a question. You raise your hand, a comment. I don't know, Fabrice. Please unmute and tell us.
Yeah, greetings to everyone. As Daniel said, my name is Fabrice. My question is, I don't know if you spoke about it, but is there a difference, according to you, between localization and transcreation? Is there a difference?
I said it at the beginning. You need to buy the book.
I think Daniel could answer that.
I believe the expert.
Yeah. Well, I know it's really confusing out there, and I get that question, or used to get that question a lot. To me, localization is making something locally understandable. Like, you would convert miles into meters, or you would change a metaphor, maybe a US baseball metaphor to a soccer metaphor, or that kind of thing. Just making sure that your target audience understands what you're saying. But you're not really adapting. It's not the step that you're actually adapting it to a new target audience. So it's not AIDA, if you like. It's just making it locally understandable. That, to me, is localization. and the difference between localization and transcreation. Does that make sense?
Okay. Not really.
Yeah, not
Okay,
specified.
okay.
Very big.
Yeah. So when you have foreign elements in a text, like, you know, just let's to make it easier, let's say the text talks about miles, and in your target text you would convert that into kilometers or whatever, just to make it locally understandable, because you assume that your target audience doesn't really understand what a mile is, just for the sake of you know, of an explanation, of an example. But in transcreation, you wouldn't just change that, you wouldn't just do that conversion, you would probably rewrite the entire passage. So let's say localization is often or mostly part of transcreation, but it's one step. It's not the final step. You don't, for the localization, you don't need the full briefing from the client. You don't need to know, to understand who is the competitor in the target market, what is the client's pain points, what are the issues, why do I have to rewrite this headline, if it's perfectly understandable. Like in our case, in the example that I showed, we could perfectly well have just written "discover our limited editions." That would have been fine. It would have been correct, but it wouldn't have been a transcreation. It isn't AIDA. So a localization doesn't make it more attention getting. It just makes it understandable.
Okay, I think it's clear.
Yeah. If I can summarize, I think transcreation is a step beyond localization. It's like you give the extra mile to your client. You don't just do your job. You go a bit further.
Yeah.
Okay. Frank, do you have another question? You want to say something? Your hand is raised.
Yes, it's not really a question. I think it's a comment. I
Mhm.
think that localization, well, I'm grateful that we are with an expert, and if I'm wrong, I think you can correct me. I think localization has to do more with the translation of contents for software and websites, while transcreation is most often used for books. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yes. Yes. Actually, a transcreation is not something I would apply to books to that extent, really, because when you, let's take a novel, just because I'm half Norwegian, so I'll say I have a Norwegian novel, and you know, it's a very dark crime novel, and you say, well, you know, for Cameroon, that sort of moody darkness, it doesn't work well. We wouldn't have to sort of lighten it and make it maybe more colorful or something. You wouldn't be allowed to do that, because you have to, for a fiction book, you have to stay true to the author. You have to be creative in your approach, but you don't change meanings. The author would be really offended if you changed that. In transcreation, the author doesn't really matter. It's not important what the author said of that piece of content, because what is important is what does the client want to achieve with it. So the author is also usually, you know, just a marketer, not a best-selling novel author. In nonfiction, we have situations where the client or even the author says, you know, go ahead and adapt that. So I transcreated a book some years ago where we had, you know, a chapter where the author had written the book for a US American audience, and there was a lot of, you know, more military phrases and military pictures and soldiers that were, it was about climate change, and there was about soldiers and armies running away from the enemy, etc., and they get to a river and they need to cross that river, and it was a very military picture, which was it's sort of typical for the US culture. Whereas in German, we were worried. We were like, you know, the military metaphors and that they won't go down well. We have to adapt that. And I recreated these scenes with people running away from a fire, from a forest fire. So I completely changed that chapter. I rewrote it, and it also had consequences for the book later on, because he referred back to that chapter several times, even in his conclusion. So we had to rewrite all of that. And that to me is a transcreation. I had a briefing, a very specific briefing. It's not something I would have been able to do on my own. I would never have the liberty to do that without, you know, having a briefing from my client telling me, okay, it's okay. You tell me this is not going to work in Germany. It's not going to work I want to sell my message. This is an important message. I want to sell it. How can you help me sell that message? And that was my briefing. And so I adapted that. And that to me is a really transcreative approach, where you combine the translation and the, you know, the copy creation, the creation of a new text.
Frank, are you okay?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm okay now.
Okay, great. It's much more clearer. And then does anybody has a question, please? Hippolyte, Christelle, Morel, Ulrich. Christian, you want to say something? A comment or a question, anything about transcreation? Okay, then something came up in my mind. Mm-hmm. What do you think about AI and transcreation?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's on everybody's mind. Yeah, and it's a very, very important aspect. I've been testing artificial intelligence tools for my work, and it's often like it's not good at transcreation. It's not even. Quite honestly, at least working. I don't know. Most of you work into French, or maybe other languages. It may semi work for English, but into other languages, not so much. I can only speak for German because that's the only language I can really judge. When I read the English, I'm like, yeah, it sort of sounds right. But when I try to put it through a tool, it's like, oh no, nobody in Germany would ever talk like that, because what the tools do, they all think in English. I mean, they don't think.
Yeah, they were fed with English,
it's all
in English. Mm-hmm.
But all these tools are trained on mostly US American data. Mm-hmm. So English, and specifically, and a lot from the US. Okay. I've been told. So it's biased, and it's also very wordy, and it tends to use very complete sentences, and it tends to get heavy. And so it's okay for sort of like if you don't have a budget, and just need to sort of get a message out, but it's not going to sell. It's not going to speak to anybody in particular. It might work if you're a really famous brand like Apple or Microsoft, maybe. You can get away with it, but because everyone trusts these brands already. But say you're a new brand, or just a startup, then that's when you have the least money, but that's when it's really important to get it right, because that's when you build your brand. That's when you start to gain people's trust. And I don't trust, maybe that's very German, but I don't trust brands that don't even have the money to come up with text that really speaks to me, that shows that they understand what I am expecting, what I'm looking for. If they can't be troubled to do that, then that's not a brand I want to trust.
Okay, then that's like a transition question, because I want us to talk about the money. It means that AI is not threatening your business. So as a transcreator, how do you charge? Is it per word, per page, or according to the difficulties of the text? How do you charge? And can somebody earn a living, like a decent, good living, being a transcreator? Because we need to talk about the money before we close. We still have 2 minutes.
Definitely. What I do is, well, definitely not by the word. I mean, no copywriter should ever, or transcreator by extension should charge by the word, because you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. Because in transcreation, it's all about, you know, being succinct and to the point. So you will actually reduce the amount of words, and that's, you know, you edit a lot, and that's a lot of work. So you're getting punished for being really good. And of course, there's so much thought processes, and even if the headline that we saw before looks like, oh yeah, easy, I mean, very logical, it takes a while to get there. It's a good sign that you think it looks easy, but it's because then it's authentic. But the things that look easy are mostly the most difficult ones, right? Even your poetry, you know, it's not about the number of words, it's about which words you choose and how you put them together. And that's what it is about. And so never by the word. It's possible to charge by the hour if that is something that the client wants. I prefer, or I almost exclusively work with project fees. So once I have a clear picture or idea of what the client wants, I have the text, I have the source text, I have my briefing, I know approximately how much time I'm going to need for that, how difficult, how much research I'm going to need to do, how much brainstorming I need to do. And then I quote a project fee, and that's a flat fee, and that's convenient for the client in the sense that they know how much it's going to cost from the get-go, and they can sign off on it, and there's not going to be any quibbling and discussions afterwards. Oh, did it take you that long? Because it's very hard for people outside, you know, that universe to understand how much work goes into it. And also, I don't like to be paid for just the time that I spend, because I mean, I've collected experience for over 30 years. So the client is paying for my expertise, not for the time that I sit at my desk. And also,
but on average per hour, just for people to have figures before we close, on average per hour, how much can a transcreator ask?
Wow, that's really, you know, that's so different from market to market. But and also depending on your experience, your expertise, obviously. And I'm not sure if I'm even allowed to give out, you know, fees that are sort of, people think is binding. But anything from, you see anything from $60 upwards. So it could be, if you're very experienced, like a senior copywriter, they could charge $300 an hour.
$300.
I mean, I'm just saying, you know, that that's the range, and that's why it makes sense to, when you say, okay, I don't have that kind of experience just yet. I'm still in the process, so I prefer to spend more hours on this. But I don't necessarily want my client to see how many hours I'm spending on this, because also, you know, part of the brainstorming is not done at the desk. It's something you do when you walk, or, you know, how are you going to, you measure the time, and how are you going to, you know, tell the client, oh, I'm not going to pay you for taking a walk. Whereas you're not taking a walk, you're actually working hard. So that's why it makes sense to have like a package fee.
Okay.
And also, so you can have an internal hourly rate, like an hourly rate for yourself, where I said, okay, I think I'm a junior, so I'm gonna charge $60 dollars, in my internal, and I'm probably gonna need like 6 hours, so it's gonna be $300. Whereas an experienced one, he might say, oh, I'm just gonna need 1.5 hours. And my internal hourly rate is 150, and the still same rate. The end is 300. So that's why I recommend to work with project fees. Yeah. I mean, the client then also has assurance it's not going to cost more than that. Yeah. And I tend to, go down hundreds of rabbit holes and when I'm doing my research, because it's also interesting, it's also fascinating. But that's not on the client, that's sort of on my own time. If I decide I'm going to spend more time than I actually have calculated just because it's so fascinating, then that's on me. So that's why it's easy for me when I say, okay, the client is going to pay that amount no matter how much time I spend on it. So that's why I recommend it. But you can't say, the hourly rate for transcreation is this. It really depends on the market, on the client, on your expertise. Also, the industry, it's gonna be different for financial industry versus fashion industry. But I take my cues. What you always can do, which is really good, is there is this. Maybe you could then send it out, Danielle, because I don't have it at hand, but you find it in the internet. This is the American, the AWAI guide. They have a pricing guide, and they have collected like average fees or fee ranges from copywriters for different types of assets. So they say, an email campaign could be this or that. So many charge by the asset, not just necessarily by the hour or by flat fee. They say, okay, email campaign, that much. One blog post, that much. That's also one way. So that's a really useful guide that I recommend.
Check that.
Yes, it's on the website, on the AWAI, American Writers and Artists, I think it's called.
I'll check that.
So that gives you a really good idea of sort of industry fee ranges.
Okay, so we close very soon, but Christian wants to say something. Yes, Christian, please unmute, and then you are the last person before we close.
Okay. Good evening, Daniel. Good evening, Nina.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Nina. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to listen to you live.
Likewise.
I read a lot about you, and I was very impressed by what I saw. And my question is about taking into account that in our forum, in this group, we are mostly young translators, something like 10 years or less of experience. According to you, how many years can a good transcreator need to reach a satisfactory level? And do you usually work with agencies or only with direct clients?
Excellent questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Christian always asks excellent questions.
Everyone has asked excellent questions. Question number one, how many years? It really depends. If you go into copywriting, full copywriting training, then probably you'd say like 2 years. If you work with especially if you work with someone who gives you feedback, it could even be less. I mean, I don't think there's like a hard and fast rule. It's a bit like translation. How many years do you need to be a good translator? I think it's very comparable. So more or less the same, I think. And the second question was help me again.
Do you usually work with agencies or sometimes agencies or only direct clients?
I prefer to work with marketing people directly. So marketing people at companies, because they are the ones who really understand, who say, okay, we have been working with agencies and it's just not working for us. It's the translations that we get, we cannot really use them as is. And we need a more direct contact. And several have reached out to me actively. Marketing people have reached out to me actively saying exactly that they have said, we have been working with an agency and they're good for, the standard stuff that we do and the manuals, etc., and the legal and medical stuff. But marketing, we don't know what's going on, but marketing text, they aren't just, we can just, dismiss them as is and start from scratch. They're not useful. So if you have the opportunity to approach marketing people directly, that would be ideal, or position yourself, as someone who works with marketing, preferably with marketing people directly, because it's really the only way for you to get the briefing that you need. Now, there are agencies as well. I do work with a few select smallish agencies, some of which have actually gone through a training of mine. so they understand, and they just contact me and say, oh, we have this client, can you please take over, so to speak. So we don't go through their normal processes. They wouldn't sort of do it in a CAT tool or something like that. They just give me the text and say, do you need a briefing? What kind of briefing do you need? And there are even agencies that say, okay, we'll put you directly. I mean, it's a matter of trust, of course, but we'll put you directly in touch with the end client, which is fabulous, obviously. But I also understand when agencies are a bit, careful with that. I would never betray an agency that is that honest. Never ever. And I have agencies who do that and it works just fine. They sit in on the first, just not long ago, the agency client was in on this session and she said, okay, you two get along right nice, I'm gonna leave now. So that is a fantastic way of working, obviously. I mean, this is so fulfilling. You feel seen, you feel appreciated. You're not just a cog in a wheel. So it's, to me, it's a lot more fun to work that way. But so it's not categorically that I exclude, that I say, oh, no, I never work with agencies, but I do select who I work with.
Okay. Thank you very much for the
answer.
answer.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your questions, Christian, Frank, and Fabrice. And thank you for all of you that were here right from the beginning. And Nina, thank you very, very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience and for explaining it to us.
It was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, I want to believe many people here have learned or discovered what transcreation is, and they have learned more about it.
Yeah, maybe, just a little bit that gives you them an idea of, okay, this is something I want to pursue further. Exactly. This is something that I could envisage myself doing. Exactly. Or say, I don't think this is for me. That's also totally okay.
That's the purpose. And also when they now be in contact with marketing people, they know what to say. They know what to, they have to tell them, to teach them, because sometimes you need to teach your clients about what you are doing. That is this is not just a translation work. This is a transcreation, and then it's good.
I mean, like
awareness.
A marketing person that reached out to me recently, she was like, I understand what you're doing, because I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while. So and I totally agree with everything you say. But you know what? I need to sell that to the people in my company, the one who actually take the budgetary decision, the financial decision. So can you give me a couple of arguments help me sort of sell it to my own people, because she is the marketing person, knew, but the others didn't really understand the difference.
You become your ambassador in the company.
Right. Yeah. So if we can help our clients, you know, sell it to their own company, that's also one thing we need to be aware of, that we need to be able to do.
Okay, so you're not going to waste more of your time, Nina. We say
it's not a
you.
waste. It's not a waste. I'm always happy to talk about transcreation.
So, and then I've already posted the cover of your book in our group, so they know where to find you.
Yeah, and like I said, if anyone wants to connect or follow me on LinkedIn, that's
LinkedIn. I'll also send your LinkedIn address.
right. Yeah.
Anything else? Is there somebody wants to say anything? Okay. Then I will say, like, somewhere. If you're not talking now, you'll be silent forever.
Oh. No. No. I mean, if you have questions later on, I mean, we can follow up on other media.
On social media. Great. So I'm going to say goodbye, Nina. Goodbye.
It was lovely to finally meet you, Danielle. I'm so happy. I'm so happy you reached out.
I'm at peace now because I need to see you.
Thank you for everyone for being here and for asking such great questions and for being interested in transcreation. I hope I was able to give you some idea. I mean, like, it's not something you can do in an hour, but at least give you an idea of how much how fulfilling it can be.
Of course. Thank you, Nina. And then
bye
goodbye, everybody.
Bye
See you next month for another
bye.
Tilc.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye bye, Christian, Frank, Hippolyte, Alette. Bye bye. See you next